TSMC has recently had a love-hate relationship with the United States. Love, since the United States is TSMC's largest market, and according to TSMC's 2021 financial reporting statistics, its revenue in the United States surpassed $1 trillion for the first time, hitting $1.01 trillion. An annual rise of nearly 24% accounted for 0.64. Despite this, a number of recent U.S. measures have left TSMC unsatisfied, and I can't help but question if TSMC would be in the same predicament as the world's largest semiconductor foundry if Huawei remained one of TSMC's strongest significant clients. TSMC controls 63% of the global semiconductor business and has attractive technology and strength. However, in 2022, the United States continues to update its chip laws, and owing to technological constraints, TSMC was obliged to shut off supplies to the firms on the restricted list and could not ship freely, and the global chip landscape has changed since then. According to the current scenario, TSMC appears to have been killed, and it is all a ruse weaved by the U.S. Why is this so? I believe 4 evidence may explain. Please provide additional information. To reclaim control of the semiconductor industry, the United States proceeded to aggressively produce domestic semiconductors. However, today's United States is not the same as it was 20 years ago. Not only is the cost of creating wafers quite expensive, but local skilled personnel is scarce. Because experienced expertise is rare, the United States regards TSMC as the savior to salvage its IC fortunes. Nonetheless, TSMC founder Morris Chang has a bad impression of the United States semiconductor sector. He claims that the semiconductor manufacturing business in the United States is understaffed and overpriced. After 25 years of operation at TSMC's Oregon manufacturing site, chip production prices in the United States are still 50% higher than in Taiwan. The United States agreed to grant subsidies in order to effectively encourage TSMC to develop a facility in the United States. But when TSMC began to build a state-of-the-art fab in Phoenix, Arizona, the promised subsidies were delayed for a long time. And, due to a lack of necessary local personnel, the plant construction was delayed midway, with delays of up to 3 to 6 months. The domestic climate hostile to the growth of the semiconductor sector, as well as the repeated delays in subsidies, have contributed to TSMC's rising irritation with the United States. Furthermore, the subsequent series of acts in the United States have irritated TSMC even more. More dissatisfaction what the United States did so. Keep tuned. To boost the competitiveness of domestic chip manufacturing capabilities, Maria Cantwell, chairman of the United States Senate Commerce Committee, hosted a chip hearing and invited several executives in the semiconductor industry to explore how to create next-generation chip technology. The chip hearing welcomed Samsung, Intel, Micron, Packard, and the CEO of the United States. Aside from addressing how to create next-generation chip technology, the hearing also looked into the limitations of the chip supply chain and the link between the chip sector and the United States' competitiveness. Because of the difficulty in attracting skilled and experienced staff, it was evident that they were beginning to marginalize TSMC. They clearly began to marginalize TSMC because it was difficult to find skilled and experienced staff in the United States. The local semiconductor market had over 5,000 job openings, and the U.S. think tank suggested that these openings could be filled from outside, preferably by TSMC's experienced talent. And when TSMC went to the U.S. to build a plant, they were also asked to hand over some of their technology cores, and apparently the US invited TSMC to work for free for the US. After the previous approach failed, the US apparently urged TSMC to work for free for the US and took advantage of the chance to obtain the essential technology. The United States began to look for ways to recruit individuals. Furthermore, in order to encourage local semiconductor makers to establish factories, the United States approved a $52 billion subsidy measure in order to relieve pressure on local factory builders. However, Intel, a corporation located in the United States, has already built 2 facilities with $20 billion in subsidies, whilst TSMC has yet to get a single dime. Finally, Huawei was TSMC's top customer, contributing more than $30 billion to the company each year. However, once the United States revised its semiconductor restrictions, TSMC lost its largest customer and many other Chinese firms were unable to deal with it. Following the loss of Huawei's orders. Because Huawei's freed-up orders were replaced by US firms such as Apple, TSMC was able to retain consistent income. According to data, Apple was the company's top customer last year, contributing revenue of 405 billion yuan, a rise of 627 billion yuan, an annual increase of 20 compared to 2020, accounting for 26% of the company's income. The rise and fall of TSMC is strongly tied to Apple's announcement of a new spring product, which drove TSMC's stock price to rebound. Furthermore, TSMC's largest market is still the United States, with sales exceeding 1 trillion yuan for the first time, hitting 1.01 trillion yuan, an annual growth rate of around 24% or 64%. And the Taiwan market ranks second, with revenue of 203.963 billion yuan, an annual growth rate of 58% or 12.8%. But it is clear from these figures that a large portion of TSMC's current revenue is dependent on these US companies, and the initiative is not in its own hands. And if these US companies break their cooperation, then TSMC's revenue will be reduced. If these US corporations ever sever their partnership, TSMC's income will suffer. All of the above evidence indicate that TSMC is being murdered by the United States, which is why TSMC's creator, Morris Chang, furiously said in a lecture at the Brookings Institution that boosting domestic chip manufacture in the United States is a waste of time and money. When he couldn't secure subsidies at first, the old guy presumably recognized that the reason TSMC opted to create a modest state-of-the-art facility with a monthly manufacturing capacity of 20,000 chips was primarily to minimize costs. However, given that the expenses cannot be cut and he has invested his own money to establish a plant for others, TSMC is understandably dissatisfied. In short, with the gradual shift of the semiconductor manufacturing center to Asia after 2000, the local chip manufacturing industry in the United States had to reduce labor spending in order to compete with the lower labor costs of semiconductor manufacturing in Asia. As a result of lower wage returns, the number of students willing to study related disciplines decreased, prompting the chip manufacturing industry to relocate to Asia and other places with lower labor costs. This cycle has lasted more than 10 years. The existing skill pool in the U.S. semiconductor manufacturing business is quite tiny, and restoring the local semiconductor manufacturing industry with a single investment is unfeasible. As a result, Morris Chang believes that if the United States wishes to revitalize domestic manufacturing, it would have to pay a significant price. If you have any ideas about TSMC being stranded in the United States, please share them in the comments below. Well, that's it for now. Your likes and comments motivate us to keep making videos in the future. If you subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up, we'd love it.